Gaddis Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, January 24th, 2018 is now called order. Mr. Paulson, will you call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Badami?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Vice Chair Hudis?
Here.
And Chair Kane.
Here. I'd ask everyone to stand and join Commissioner O'Donnell in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The town of Los Gaddis strongly encourages active participation in the public process, which is the cornerstone of democracy and essential to the Planning Commission conducting its business on behalf of the Town Council and the citizens of the town. There are several ways for members of the public to participate in the deliberations of the Planning Commission. Written comments concerning agenda items submitted to the staff prior to a commission meeting are always welcome and helpful. At the meeting itself, there are two ways for members of the public to participate. During verbal communications, an individual may speak on any topic not on the agenda, and any member of the public may speak during the public hearing of items that are on the agenda. If you wish to address the Commission tonight during the verbal communication period or during the consideration of an item, please complete a speaker card located on the back of the benches or the bench in front of you, depending upon where you're sitting. Turn the card into a staff member and please print your name clearly. For anyone who intends to speak this evening, I'd ask that you come to the podium, adjust the microphone so that you are speaking directly into it. State your name and address for the record. In fairness to all who want to speak at this meeting, it is requested that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll ask for subcommittee reports. I know we have historic, and I know we have 4 items on that agenda. Who will be giving that?
I can talk about historic.
Commissioner Hudis.
Thank you. We had 4 items that we considered tonight. 121 Glenridge Avenue, requesting approval for replacement of original windows, which was approved. 202 University Avenue, requesting approval of a minor residential development in a historic district. This one was continued. And 51 College Avenue, which was requesting approval to remove a pre-1941 property from the historic inventory, which was not approved. And that one was approved. And then the next one, 15 Loma Alta Avenue, which was requesting preliminary proposal to demolish. And that one, we just gave feedback on that. That wasn't up for consideration.
Thank you. Other reports? In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, members of the Commission serve on a number of town committees. And since we're going into a new term, I was asked to confirm those appointments. I checked with the Commission, and folks want to stay on the committees that they're on, which is General Plan, Commissioners Janoff, Birch, and Hanson. Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, Commissioners Badami, Kane, and O'Donnell. And the Historic Preservation Committee, Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Vice Chair Hudis. That's for the record. We now come to verbal communications. Members of the public are invited to address the Commission on any issue not on tonight's agenda. Remember, there's a 3-minute time limit. When the yellow light comes on, it means you have 30 seconds. When the red light comes on, it means you're finished. Do we have any cards tonight for verbal communications? Moving on. We move to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar may be acted upon by a single motion, but before the Planning Commission acts on consent, any member of the public or any member of the Commission may request that an item be removed. Our agenda tonight provided that we have 2 items on consent. Actually, I'm going to suggest that we have 3. Item 1 is approval of the minutes of January 10, 2018. Item 2 is 22 South Santa Cruz Conditional Use Permit, application U16003. This is an annual review of an previously approved CUP to operate cooking classes with beer and wine service and alternating use of parking on property zone C2. This was and is APN 510-45014. Then the other item we have on consent is to dispatch item 4, which was a town code amendment application, project location townwide. The applicant is the town of Los Gatos, and the applicant has requested a continuation of this item. So I'm just going to put it on consent instead of going to it later. Is that acceptable? Does anyone wish to pull any of the items on the consent calendar? In which case, can I see a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Commissioner Badami.
Second.
All in favor? Passes unanimously. We now move to the public hearings portion of our agenda and consider agenda item number 3, which is 16135 Cerro Vista Drive. It's an architecture and site application S17044, requesting approval for construction of an addition greater than 100 square feet to the existing second story and exceed the maximum floor area ratio and maximum building height for an existing single-family residence on property zoned HR 2 1/2. This is APN 537-30018. Property owner, applicant are here tonight, I believe, and who will we be hearing from? Oh, wait, why don't we try a staff report first? Staff report. Mr.
Safdie.
Safdie. Mr. Safdie is new with us. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. The project before you is a request to construct a 113-square-foot addition on the second floor of an existing home located on a 10.2-acre parcel in the Hillside Residential Zone. The project is being reviewed by the Planning Commission because the proposal would exceed the maximum height for visible homes in the hillside areas and exceed the maximum allowed floor area. The existing residence and proposed addition are visible from the viewing platform located at the intersection of Blossom Hill Road and Los Gatos Boulevard. The proposed addition would increase the visibility from 79% to 79.3%. Visible homes in the hillside are limited to 18 feet in height and 28 feet for any elevation. The existing home is 24 feet in height, and the building's tallest elevation is 29 feet. The proposed addition would be more than 18 feet above grade and 28 feet in elevation, and therefore requires approval of a major exception to the hillside development standards and guidelines. The application is also being considered by the Planning Commission because the proposed gross floor area would exceed the 6,000 square foot maximum. The existing home is 5,979 gross square feet, and the total proposed floor area would be 6,092 gross square feet. Staff recommends approval of the floor area exception because the proposed project would not be the largest in the immediate area in terms of square footage or floor area ratio. Staff also recommends approval of the proposed building height exception because the existing residence exceeds the building height maximum, and the proposed bathroom addition would not increase the maximum height of the existing residence. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Before I see questions, may I see a show of hands of commissioners who were able to visit the subject property? I imagine you also got in, because I didn't, but I did walk around it. Questions for staff? Commissioner Birch.
So just to clarify, are they seeking an exception for the height? Because the house as it stands exceeds the height allowable. Is that a part of our determination here to somewhat retroactively allow for that?
That is correct. So the proposal would be taller than the 18-foot and for both the height maximum limitations. So although the existing home is over height, the proposal would also need an exception.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Janoff, did you have your hand up? Commissioner Hanson.
I had two questions. One was regarding dates. As I read this, the reason why that staff is recommending this to be approved is that the House submitted an architecture and site in 2003, which predated our Hillside Design Standards and Guidelines. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So the question I had was about the date that the house was built was actually in 2007, so there was like a 4-year gap. So is our policy is that it's based on the date of the architecture and site and not the date that it was put in service?
So I'll jump in here. There's no policy on when it's built versus when it's approved. The application was submitted in 2003, but I believe it was actually approved in 2004. Therefore, they're required to get building permits at least within the next 2 years of the approval, and then they have the construction period. That's why there is a discrepancy from when they originally filed the A&S application to when they finished construction.
But that's why. So basically, what you're saying though is that's why it's okay that they didn't have to comply originally with the Hillside Standards and Guidelines because the architecture and site approval occurred prior to the issuance of the Hillside Design Standards and Guidelines.
Generally, yes.
Yeah, and that would be not just generally by state law. Once the architectural and site was approved, they have a vested right then. They have received approval, and if no appeal occurs, obviously, then they have approval for that project. And if any project we do, perfect example is, obviously the North 40 is anytime you make changes to the project, it doesn't, to the rules or regulations or standards, it won't affect a project that's already vested, which occurred once the architectural and site was completed.
Okay, good. One other quick question. As far as the conditions for approving the floor area ratio exception, one of the conditions was about permeable surfaces, and the comment that was made, it says in the design guidelines that you have to have more than 25% permeable surfaces. And the way I read it is the house doesn't currently have that, and since the project doesn't involve permeable surfaces, it's not an issue. I just wanted to understand because that's something that we're required to say that is a finding, and I wanted to understand about the permeable surfaces because it's just said it's not an issue.
They're not modifying the permeable surface at all, and they're not increasing the footprint, so staff doesn't believe that that specific item needs to be addressed. However, if the commission disagrees, then you could require that as a condition of approval, but essentially we don't want someone to go out and rip up impervious surface to replace it with pervious surface if they're not proposing to impact any of that at all.
Well, okay, so I understand it, but as I also read, they're going to change the light reflectivity value by painting the trimmings from white to a darker color. So I don't know. I don't see any big issue with that. I just wanted to understand how that process worked.
The painting of the trim?
No, the permeable surfaces, because it doesn't have anything to do with the addition, but since it's coming up for discretionary approval of some kind, then I didn't know if that was something that should be brought up.
You definitely can bring it up. Staff doesn't believe it's relevant in relation to this application. However, if the commission thinks differently, they always have that choice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Hudis.
Just a quick question about the visibility analysis. I understand that there's a new visibility analysis. I wasn't sure what the status was. Could you clarify that? And also, is this property subject to that? Is it relevant to what we're considering tonight?
So the updates to the visibility analysis have been adopted by council. So we will be getting those to the Planning Commission shortly so that you can insert those new sheets into your guidelines as well as getting them online. The only change that would affect this application is that if you have a visible home, all of your materials have to be an LRV of less than 30. And so that's why the applicant is painting their trim, painting their gutters. Previously, as I think we talked about when we talked about the visibility, staff looked at the main body of the house and made sure that LRV was 30, but trim and gutters and those things, staff did not require to be that. However, this change will incorporate the revisions that are necessary.
Thank you.
It will be all
Less than 30.
LRV less than 30.
Correct.
All right. Other questions? I have a comment for staff, a thank you. On page 6 of 8 of the report, under neighborhood compatibility, the neighboring properties are shown zone, size, FAR, but the final column is year built, and that's a request we had made, I think, at our prior meeting. It prevents you from going crazy saying, how did that 8,000 square foot house get there? Well, it got there because it was built in 1995. So I thought the dates would be relevant. All of these structures predate the Hillside Standards and Guidelines. And so if you see big numbers, that's because the guidelines weren't in effect at that time, and we can determine that by having that column with the dates on there. Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'm going to open the public portion of the public hearing and give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 10 minutes. And we have...
My name is Bob Fleury. I'm with Fleury Bryant Design Group. We're the project designers. I just want to, we totally agree with the staff report. There's nothing in there that we're contesting. So I just want to let you know that we're here. If you have any questions of us, I'm here. Todd Bayless, the project architect, is here, and the owner, Ruben Caballero, is here. So if you have any questions, hopefully between the three of us, we'll be able to answer them.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. I read your letters of justification, but I just wanted to understand. It's a lot of effort to go through a planning commission hearing and to get a 113 square foot addition to a master bath. And when I was reading the letters of justification, I didn't see any particular reason for doing this. So I just wanted to understand, what the driving force was behind this, because we're being asked to approve exceptions to the Hillside guidelines.
Well, I would have to defer to the owner on that. I mean, the owner would like to have, a nice big master bathroom. And so that's what we're trying to give him.
And there was also a comment in the justification letter that something to the effect of that the owner or applicant didn't want to be denied things that were already available to the other houses in the vicinity. So is there some discrepancy between the...
I'm going to let Todd Bayless respond to that because he actually wrote the letter and all that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bayless, give us your name and address, please.
My name is Todd Bayless, and I am also with Fleury Bryant Design Group. I believe you're referring to item A in my justification letter. The strict application of the zoning regulations deprives the property of the privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity and under identical zone classifications. And that's referring to the square footage of the house. As we just looked on, I believe it was page 6 of the report, there are houses in the vicinity, some of which are on smaller lots that have larger footprints.
Questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. You have more time if you want to provide us with additional information, or if the owner does. Then I'm going to open up this portion of the hearing to members of the public to provide general comment. They may speak up to 3 minutes. I see no cards. So you get an additional 5 to add or debate anything you heard. All right. Commission? I have some items. Please, come back up. Number one, I wanted to compliment you on your letters of justification. They were very helpful, very clear, and can set us on a road of understanding the project. The second concern I had was in the staff report itself and in the conditions of approval. There is a comment on, this is item 6, where I think you wrote, exception to maximum allowable floor area. And this is the 9 bullets where you have to be able to comply with every one of them to get the exception. And number 6 is, the house will be pre-wired for future photovoltaic, did I say that right, Commissioner Burge? installation. And the comment is, it is the intent of the owner to install PV panels at a later date, and the current proposal will incorporate pre-wiring. So it seems to me like the standard conditions of approval for this project, not your letter, but those say you need to pre-wire. And I'm just wondering, I guess if you pre-wire, you meet the condition, then you don't have to do anything else. Is it the intent, in fact, to put in the photocells?
At some point in the future, the intent wasn't to do it as part of this project.
Well, if you're providing for the wiring, why not finish it? Cost?
I'm not sure what the driving factor was there. You have any input on that? Yeah, I think he's trying to, we're trying to control the scope of the project so that it's manageable and we can get them moved into the house because they haven't even lived there yet. And so the things that we could defer, we're deferring, like the, installation of the solar panels.
All right, thank you. Any other comment or question? Commissioner Birch.
So it is a lot of work for 113,000 square feet. Sorry, 113. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm reading and talking. My apologies. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm just a little curious on, when you look at the layout here and how you extended the bathroom just into the terrace, why maybe instead of going through this exercise and this cost, you didn't utilize a portion of the rec room, push that closet over and rework the master bathroom that way? It would have given you pretty much the same square footage and you wouldn't be
there's
here.
purposes for all those other rooms, though. I mean, we didn't want to give up, bedrooms and rec rooms to do that if we didn't have to, So, yeah, it's just...
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of an overall design. And, the other rooms in the house have a function, and we didn't want to remove those functions for the bathroom.
Okay.
Any further questions? Thank you. I'll now close the public portion of the public hearing and ask if any commissioners have questions for staff, wish to make a comment on the application, or wish to make a motion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'd like to make a motion that, hang on for a second, that we approve the architecture and site application subject to the recommended conditions of approval, which are set forth in Exhibit 3, and we would find that the proposed project is categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15303 of the California Environmental Quality Act, which is described in Exhibit 2. We make the findings as required by the Hillside standards for granting an exception to the maximum allowed height of 18 feet for visible homes in the Hillside area, and the required findings as required by the same ordinance for granting an exception to the maximum allowed height of 28 feet of a building's tallest elevation as measured from the lowest point of the building to the highest point for visible homes in the Hillside area, and making the required findings for granting an exception to the maximum allowed floor area of 6,000 feet, and the finding that other than the exception to the maximum allowed building height and maximum floor area, the project complies with the HDS&G. Make the finding that the project is in compliance with the Hillside specific plan set forth in Exhibit, references set forth in Exhibit 2. We would make the required considerations as required by Section 2920-150 of the Town Code for granting approval of the architect and site application, and approve the architecture and site application S17023 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 3 and the development plans in Exhibit 10.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Janoff. Comments on the motion? If not, I have a question for staff. I'm going to go back to that solar panel question again. And in our allowing for exceptions to maximum allowable floor, it seemed like this is a standard provision that the applicant ought to run wires. I don't see what we accomplished by just running wires. Would it be unfair or unprecedented to seek a date certain or a time limit? If we're going to run those wires, why not hook up the solar?
Because the requirement is only to pre-wire the house. It does not say you have to install the solar panels. And so I don't believe that's something that you should impose. However, as you know, the commission can always impose any additional conditions they wish.
Well, I'll take it offline. I just think it's curious that we get it all set up, but we don't finish the job. So, any other comments or questions? Commissioner Hudis.
I'll be supporting the motion, although I did not necessarily find it a compelling argument that the other rooms already have a purpose. What is persuasive to me is my examination of the site and looking at the actual impact, and then going to the viewing platform at the corner of Blossom Hill and the Boulevard and looking and seeing that really this is minimal, is the way I would describe the impact. So I will be supporting the motion because I think it is really a minimal change, and so therefore I think I can support it.
I'd like to support that comment by saying the letter on January 3rd from Mr. Bayless, where he provides a shadow outline of what's there and what's going to be there, and that's like a tiny little speck, meets the definition of de minimis, I would think. Again, a good report. I intend to support the motion. Other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights?
There are appeal rights. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. The forms are available in the clerk's office, and there is a fee for filing the appeal.
Thank you. Moving on to other business, are there any commission matters? Concerns, comments? Then I'll take a report from the Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Chair. So on January 16th, the council introduced modifications to the accessory dwelling units ordinance. They also considered proposed amendments to the North 40 specific plan, but ultimately continued that to 2.6 and requested some additional information from staff. And they also approved a story pole exception for 16212 Los Gatos Boulevard. That is a project that was previously proposed as residential. They have since changed that to a commercial project, and the exception that they received was to minimize the time that the poles need to be up. And so the poles will only be up for 10 days, which is a little shorter than they typically would be. And then that time would span, it probably starts 10 days before the Planning Commission hearing and runs through the Planning Commission hearing. They received a similar exception for the residential project as well. And so when that one is ready to come before the Planning Commission, that will occur.
This is the wine depot looked at?
Correct.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. And then lastly, on 2.6, we are looking forward to beginning an update of our general plan. We adopted the general plan in 2010, and it is original intent was to go through 2020, so we are beginning now in hopes that we will, somewhere around that 2020 timeframe, be through that process. So we'll be going to the council and asking for input from them on scope and items that they want to see addressed so that we can prepare a work plan to take back for their consideration and then ultimately go out for a request for proposals so that we can get a consultant on board to help us with the general plan update and the environmental impact report that will go along with that document.
Thank you. Anything else? This is my first night as chair for this term. I just want to know, am I going to get in trouble for getting us out of here before 7:30? I don't want to.
You win an award.
Any other comment? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.